It was supposed to be our anniversary cabin, the place where my wife and I had spent every Thanksgiving long weekend for the past 12 years, ever since we drove up Highway 11 on a whim and fell in love with an old pine frame cottage sitting at the edge of a lake north of Huntsville. We'd bought it the following spring. We'd never once regretted it. I was 67 years old. I'd spent 31 years teaching high school history in Barrie, and when I retired 4 years ago, my wife said the same thing she always said when something big happened in our lives. Well, now what? We laughed. We always laughed. That's the thing I want you to understand before I tell you the rest of this. We were not people who lived in tension. We were not a family with a dark undercurrent. Or at least, I didn't think we were. The plan for that October-long weekend had been simple. My wife would drive up with our daughter and her husband on Friday afternoon. I'd follow Saturday morning because I had a former colleague's retirement dinner on Friday evening in Barrie. A good man named Stewart, 40 years in the school board, deserved a proper send-off. I'd be maybe 18 hours behind them. Nothing unusual about that. We'd done variations of it before. I left Barrie at 7 Saturday morning. The maples along Highway 11 were full color, that deep burnt orange that only lasts about a week in October, and I remember thinking I should take a photo for my wife, because she always said she never got to see the peak color from the road. She always arrived when it had already started dropping. I didn't stop to take the photo. I wish that was the strangest decision I made that weekend, but it wasn't. I pulled onto the gravel lane just before 10. There were 2 vehicles in the yard, my wife's Subaru and my son-in-law's truck. Also a third car I didn't recognize, a dark gray sedan with Ontario plates, parked closest to the front door. I assumed one of them had invited someone. It wasn't the first time my daughter had showed up with extra people without mentioning. I knocked twice, which is something I'd gotten into the habit of doing, even at my own cabin, because my daughter had asked me to once, and I'd never bothered to change it. No one answered. The door was unlocked. The kitchen was empty, but there were open wine bottles on the counter. 3 of them, 2 already drained. It was just after 10 in the morning. I stood there for a moment trying to work out the math of that. Had they started last night and not cleaned up? That seemed like my daughter. She wasn't the tidying type, but even still. I heard my wife before I saw her. A sound from the back bedroom, not quite crying, more like someone trying to stop crying and not succeeding. A low, rhythmic kind of misery that you only make when you think no one can hear you. The bedroom door was half open. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, in her coat, like she hadn't even taken it off. Her eyes were red and her hands were in her lap, and she was looking at the floor at a point about 2 feet in front of her. When I came through the door, she looked up at me, and the expression on her face is something I've thought about every day since. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't relief. It was something I can only describe as the look of a person who has been carrying something alone and is trying to decide, in the space of 2 seconds, whether or not to put it down. "You are early," she said. "Stewart's dinner ended at 9, I said. "I slept in Barrie and left this morning. What's going on? Why are you sitting in your coat?" She looked away. "I'm just tired." She was not just tired. I'd been married to this woman for 41 years. I knew every version of tired she had, and this wasn't one of them. "Where's our daughter?" A pause. "Outside on the deck, I think." I went back through the kitchen and to the sliding door that opened onto the back deck. The deck faced the lake, and that time of year, the birch on the far shore had gone almost completely white and gold, and the water in the morning was still and flat like a piece of gray glass. It was, objectively, beautiful. My daughter was standing at the railing with a glass of champagne. Not wine, champagne. At 10 in the morning. Her husband was beside her, and beside him was a man I had never seen before, in a dark jacket, holding a leather folder. All 3 of them were laughing at something. My son-in-law had his arm around my daughter's shoulder. I opened the sliding door. My daughter turned, and the laugh dropped off her face so fast it looked like a switch being thrown. Her husband turned a second later, slower, and then the man with the leather folder turned last. He had a practiced smile, the kind you learn in a sales environment. "Dad," my daughter said, "you're not supposed to be here until tonight." "Plans changed," I said. I looked at the man with the folder. "Who are you?" My son-in-law stepped forward slightly, This is just a friend from the city. He came up for the weekend. The man with the folder put out his hand. Wayne Prentice, he said. I'm a realtor with Muskoka Lakes Properties. No one spoke for a moment. I looked at my daughter. She had found something interesting to look at on the railing. I see, I said. And what brings a realtor to my cabin on a Saturday morning in October? There was a long pause. And in that pause I understood that something had been in motion for longer than I had known about it. The champagne glasses. My wife crying in her coat. The unlocked door. The wine bottles in the kitchen from the night before. All of it assembled itself in a few seconds into a shape I could read. My son-in-law. His name was Kevin. And I want to be precise about him, because precision matters here. Kevin cleared his throat. We've been talking about the property, he said. We thought it might be good for the whole family to think about what the cabin represents. Financially. Going forward. Going forward, I repeated. You and Mom aren't getting any younger, my daughter said, and her voice had that particular gentleness that people use when they're saying something hard but want you to feel like it's coming from kindness. Maintaining a second property is a lot. The taxes alone. And the market right now. The market right now is excellent, the realtor said helpfully. I looked at him for a moment. He seemed to understand that was not a helpful thing to have added, because he found something in his folder to look at. Your mother, I said to my daughter, does she want to sell this cabin? A silence. We've talked about it, my daughter said. That's not what I asked. I went back inside. I went to the back bedroom where my wife was still sitting on the edge of the bed. I closed the door. I sat beside her and I said very quietly, tell me what happened last night. What she told me took about 20 minutes. It came out in pieces the way things do when someone has been holding them for a while and the container finally cracks. The previous evening, she said, Kevin had started talking about the cabin over dinner, how much it was worth now, and he had a number, a specific number, which told me he'd already talked to someone. He talked about carrying costs, property tax, the MPAC assessment, maintenance on a building this old. He'd made it sound reasonable, even responsible. I've thought a lot about that image. My wife sitting on the edge of the bed in her coat, looking at a spot on the floor like she was trying to find something she'd dropped there. She wasn't confused. She wasn't losing her mind. She was a woman who had been made to doubt herself by someone who had something to gain from her uncertainty. That distinction matters more than I can say. What Kevin did wasn't dramatic. That's the part that stays with me. There was no raised voice, no obvious threat. There were wine bottles and a specific number he'd already looked up, and a gentle, reasonable-sounding conversation about planning ahead. The harm was in the framing. It always is. When someone wants to take something from you quietly, they don't come at you directly. They come at your confidence first. They make you feel like the careful, sensible thing to do is the thing that happens to benefit them. I've watched enough history to know that this pattern is not new. It didn't start with Kevin, and it won't end there. What changes is whether the person on the receiving end of it holds their ground. My wife didn't, that night, and I don't blame her for it. She'd been caught off guard in a place she loved, by someone she'd tried to welcome into the family. She didn't have her defenses up because she hadn't thought she'd need them. That's not a failure of judgment. That's what it looks like to trust someone. But here's what I've come to understand. The moment I walked out onto that deck and said what I said, I wasn't doing anything heroic. I was just doing what honesty requires. I'd spent 31 years in a classroom telling young people that integrity isn't a feeling, it's a practice. It means you say the true thing even when the room gets uncomfortable. It means you name what you're seeing even when naming it costs you something. That morning, it cost me a version of family peace I'd been quietly maintaining for years. I think, looking back, that version was already gone. My son, the way he handled his sister. That's the thing I'm most proud of in all of this. He didn't rush in with conclusions. He did the patient, unglamorous work of actually finding out what was true before he said anything. And when he spoke to his sister, he led with her, not with his anger on my behalf. That kind of steadiness is not something you're born with. It's something you build over a long time by deciding repeatedly that the short-term satisfaction of reacting is less valuable than the long-term result of understanding. He understood that clearly enough to act on it when it mattered. My daughter said she'd known something was wrong and had talked herself into not knowing. I've been turning that sentence over ever since. I think most of the damage that gets done in families happens in that gap. The space between what we sense and what we're willing to see. Closing that gap takes a kind of courage that isn't loud or impressive from the outside. It just looks like a person sitting at a kitchen table with their hands around a mug of tea, choosing, finally, to stop pretending. The cabin is still ours. My wife picked out new curtains for the front bedroom on the drive up at Christmas. We sat on the dock in January, which was probably ill-advised for people our age. But neither of us moved first. Some things you hold on to, not because they're worth money, because they're worth something else entirely, and you only understand what that is the first time someone tries to take it from you.